Okay, greetings everyone out there, wherever you are in the world. Today we're on the 18th day of the month of Elul, year 5775, holy time. This week we are continuing part 3 of our series on same-sex marriages, homosexuality, and what it means for us today. Before we start the lesson, we have to give 2 likes here. That's 2 big thumbs up to 2 very, very brave people. One, I think I've mentioned before, is a person named Jack Phillips in Colorado, owns a bakery shop, and he refused to bake a cake for one of these same-sex marriages. Now they're threatening to take him to court. Today, as I was looking on the news summaries on the Drudge report, so I noticed the following story here. A federal judge has ordered Kim Davis and her deputies to appear in a courtroom Thursday to explain her refusal to hand out same-sex couple marriage license. In a brief but tense encounter between Davis and a couple dozen marriage equality demonstrators who crowded into her office, the clerk repeatedly refused to comply with the court order. Under whose authority, before we start this, it's good that every Jew opens up their ears and listens to this. Under whose authority are you not issuing marriage licenses? Someone in the crowd asked Davis. Under God's authority, she responded. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. I'm willing to face my consequences, and you all will face your consequences when it comes time for judgment. You know, I could just hear that. I can hear the music in the background. On the bloody morning after, ooh, one tin soldier rides away. Right, time of judgment, plain and simple. Davis has refused to issue any marriage licenses in Rowan County since the U.S. Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage on June 26. On U.S. District Judge David Bunning issued a preliminary injunction August 12th ordering Davis to resume issuing licenses. She appealed to the 6th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, both of which denied her. Anyways, here we have here Davis, a Democrat, was elected to a 4-year term last November. She cannot be removed from her roughly $80,000 a year post unless the General Assembly impeaches her. Be interesting to see. In a prepared statement Tuesday released through her lawyers, Davis said she received death threats since she began her protest against the SS marriage. I never imagined a day like this would come, where I would be asked to violate a central teaching of scriptures regarding marriage, David said. I was elected by the people to serve as the county clerk. I intend to continue to serve the people of Rowan County, but I cannot violate my conscience. There was a festive atmosphere outside the Rowan County Courthouse. More than 100 protesters, some supporting Davis, others opposing her, sang and shouted slogans at one another from across the entryway. Sheriff's deputies watched, but there were no arrests.
Can I give a shout out to Kim?
Yeah,
Kim tweeted me. I sent the support before this lecture started. It was last night. So Kim does have a Twitter account, and her Twitter account is @KimDavis917. So in Israel we'd say strudel Kim Davis 917.
All right.
So please, anyone who listens to this, please tweet her and give her your support. Show her some love.
Tweet. Okay, by the way, I hope, God willing, just like I spoke to Jack Phillips on the phone, I was able to find him. And God willing, today I'm going to send him the links of these classes. He asked for them. Hopefully, I will find Kim Davis's phone number, give her a call also, and give her a big like there, big hug, so to speak, over the phone. And it's very interesting. I think what we should learn here from, many times in life there are simple people that go about their own business, they go out, they work hard, do their jobs for many, many years. Why were they placed here? For this one moment. It says in the Torah, Yesh Adam shekoneh olamo b'shah echad. There are people that they acquire their portion in the world to come in 1 minute, in 1 second, in one instance. And that's the way I see it with Kim Davis, quiet, never heard of her, never even heard of that county before. Jack Phillips, never heard of these people. But God, Hashem, has put these people in certain positions, and they could be there for years and years, dozens of years. And their reason is that one day there will come an instance like this to their doorstep, and that's their they were created for this one moment. And a lot of people are created for the moment, but they mess up, they goof up. But these two, thank God, they were able to stand and make a tremendous sanctification of God's name, of Hashem's name. So that's how we're going to start out with the class. Okay. Last week we talked about the connection between the generation of the flood and also the generation of Sodom, and Gomorrah. Now we're going to have the third leg of the triangle, which is going to be when the Jewish people come into the land of Israel, right? We were 210 years in the land of Egypt, deep down in the land of Egypt, and we get out, and 40 years in the desert, and now we're heading towards the Holy Land. It says in the Torah, in the portion of the week Acharei Mot, Leviticus chapter 18, verse 13. God warns the Jewish people that when they come into the land of Israel, to their homeland, they should not copy the actions of the Egyptians, nor should they copy the actions of the Canaanites. So, before we go into what their actions were, why is God specifying these two nations? There's a lot of nations, 70 nations in the world. Today there's more, but there's all kinds of nations that are really 3, 4, 5, 6. They're really one like flag, really. They're just, today they divide them up more. But as we know, there are 70 root nations. So why does God specify these two, Canaanites and also the Egyptians? First, before we go on that avenue, we have to understand where did the nation of Egypt and where did the nation of Canaanites, where did they come from? Where is their lineage? So very interesting. If we go back to the book of Breshit, the book of Genesis, we see something very interesting. We see that the name Egypt and the name Canaan appears as children of none other, drum roll, none other as Ham. As we know, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yafet. Those were the 3 sons. And when they all got out of the ark, Ham, one of the 3 sons of Noah, did a terrible thing to his father. Now, there are 2 opinions in the Talmud on the 70th page of the Tractate of Sanhedrin. There are 2 opinions exactly what happened, what did Noah's son did to him. One opinion is that he did something to his reproduction organs that did not allow Noah to have any more children. That's the first opinion of Chazal, of the rabbis. The second opinion is that he had homosexual relations with his father. So either way you slice it, what happens is that Noah, after he was drunk, after he became sober from his drinking, he realized what had been done to him, and he cursed his son. He didn't curse his son because God already had blessed Noah and his children, but he cursed his fourth son. Why his fourth son? Because, as we know, Noah had 3 sons, and he wanted to have one more child. He was sure that he was able to have one more kid, so that would have been his fourth. But now, after what Ham performed on his father, now he's unable to have his fourth kid. So measure for measure, Noah curses out the fourth son. So who are we talking about here? We're talking about, interesting enough, we're talking here about Canaan. And then, of course, we're talking about Egypt. So think about it. It's really an amazing concept. It says in the book called Midrash HaChefetz, it says that the reason why these 2 nations are singled out, Egypt and Canaanites, is because more than anybody else, they participated in illicit sexual relations. Now, what exactly are we talking about? To hit the nail on the head, more clear, what kind of illicit relations are we talking about? We have Torat Kohanim, 12th chapter, paragraph number 8. It says in the Torat Kohanim, what would they do in Egypt and what would they do in Canaan that was considered to be illicit relationships? Listen closely. This is an amazing thing. We're talking about 4,000 years ago. 4,000 years ago. It says the following: they allowed males to marry males, and they allowed females to marry other females. Therefore, Hashem warned, God warns the Jewish people, when you come into the land of Israel, which is formerly the land of Canaan, Canaanites, be careful not to practice what they did. And their practice was homosexual activity and also recognition of same-sex marriages. So you think that when you turn on the news today, you think you're getting the news. You're not getting the news. It's all been written before, thousands of years ago. It's been written down. Okay, so we see, very interesting, just to close this little piece up, we see that what happens is, we know that there's a chain reaction, or a domino reaction in life. If a person is a good person, he passes that down to the future generations that he brings. If there was this disgraceful act by the son of Noah, Ham, this disgraceful act, or he created a situation where his father could no longer reproduce, or he performed homosexual activity against his father, in either case, okay, what happens? This continues down the tube, down the following generations. This practice continues. And therefore, in Egypt and in the land of Canaan, these were practices that were common occurrences in their days. It all started from the source, from the root, which was the son of Noah. So it's an amazing thing. You do a great thing, you pass it down, for generations and generations. You do a terrible thing, gets into the blood, it gets into the genes, and keeps on rolling on bad news. Okay, moving on here.
Can I just make a comment quick,
Yeah.
Rabbi? Not that you have to respond to it now, but it's interesting that, okay, so Noah had 3 children. So Ham basically got Africa, and Yafet got Europe, and Shem got, Asia. But it's interesting, the point is that it seems that after this curse occurred, that really the most powerful nation was Egypt for a while, until Moses came and then they got whacked, so to speak. It's interesting that it was kind of a fluke, like there was a buildup of an evil, even though Noah did do the curse.
We have to remember, good question, just quickly, because I want to keep on track over here, but we have to remember, the Torah teaches us the fact that Hashem, God does not want to embarrass the Jewish people, and when He moves the cards and He places the Jewish people to be to have to subjugate themselves to foreign nations, He wants to make sure that the nation is not a joke nation. Imagine if you're a slave in Yemen. It's kind of like a little bit of an embarrassment, this backwards country. But if you're a slave in the number one power, the number one technological power, the number one educational, philosophical power of your time, it's not such an embarrassment. Which means that if you lose to the Chicago Blackhawks, the Stanley Cup 2015, baby, if you lose to us, it ain't no embarrassment. You know what I'm saying? It's not such an embarrassment. If you lose to some team that's won 5 games, 6 games, all year round, okay, that's a real big embarrassment. So Hashem sends us He builds up a nation in order that it should not be an embarrassment to the fact that we're under such a low type of country. Okay, now moving on here, the commentary on the Torah called Meshech Chochmah. He points out a very interesting observation here. It says that in the book of Genesis, when it talks about the boundaries of Canaan, when he talks about the boundaries of the nation of Canaanites, it brings down all the places except one place was not given, and that place is called Zoar. So why was that a place not included in the map here? It says unbelievable Torah here. It says the reason why Zoar was saved, if you remember, Lot gets out with his family. Where do they go to? A place called Zoar. How come that place was saved and the boundaries of Canaan, which included Sodom, were destroyed? He says here the following. It says because of the fact that we have a principle in Torah. Hashem does not punish future generations if they do not continue the sins of their forefathers. If they're going on a new path, on a true path, Hashem will not visit the sins of the forefathers onto the heads of the children or the grandchildren. But if the children are continuing the bad deeds of the forefathers, then Hashem will punish them both for what their parents did or grandparents did, plus what they're doing. So here, very interesting. We say here that the fact is that Sodom, they continued the practice of their forefathers, which was who? Which was Canaan. Which is who? Which is Ham. Which homosexual activity. Same-sex marriages are recognizing. So because of the fact that they continued this practice, their country was destroyed. The only place that did not practice this was a place called Zoar, and therefore they were not destroyed. And he writes, his last word is, it's very simple concept. The Meshech Chochmah finishes. It's very simple. That's why this place was saved, because they did not accept these same-sex marriages. They did not participate in this homosexual activity. So you could look that up on in Genesis 10:19 in the book called Meshech Chochmah. Okay. The last thing is we're going to make a final connection. We said the triangle, which is the generation of the flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Jewish people coming into the land of Israel, formerly the land of Canaan, and being warned, do not go in the ways of the Canaanites. Ham. We get back to what they did to Noah, right? Here we're going to close it in. It says in Vayikra Rabbah 23:9, Rav Chia, he says, how come it says by the verses that you should not travel in the paths of the Egyptians and you should not go in the ways of the Canaanites? Why does it say, I am your God, twice? It's enough one time. Why does it say 2 times? It says the following, just like I punished the generation of the flood and the generation of Sodom and Gomorrah and Egypt, anybody that participates in this kind of behavior, I guarantee that they will be punished also. There should be an obvious question here, which is asked by the commentator Eshet HaNechalim. If we count up how many generations are here, we find 3. We see there's the flood, and there's Sodom, and there's Egypt. So that's 3. But it says 2 times. So listen very closely. The commentator Eshet HaNechalim says that the Sodom and the flood are considered to be one generation because their sin was the same exact sin of this kind of immodest sexual behavior. So therefore we see that according to Chazal, according to the rabbis, the holy rabbis, they make a connection between these three communities, community of Canaan and Egypt and Sodom and the flood. So we see that this is the triangle in the Torah. Okay, now to understand the severity of this, I'm going to read 3 quickies over here to understand the severity of this transgression. Number 1, if we open up the famous book Sefer HaChinuch, which brings down the 613 commandments divided up by the portion of the week, it says the following. If you look up the commandment 209, you'll see the following words. The reason why this is the prohibition in participating in homosexual activity. It says the following. The reason why that God brought down this as a commandment is that God wants the world to multiply. One of the commandments, not just to the Jewish people, but to the world, is to multiply. It is to multiply. So God wanted the world to be a place that was full of people, and therefore people that are participating in this immodest behavior, this immodest behavior of the same sex, they are destroying their seed. And God gave us seed in order to reproduce. And therefore, if you're using it, a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, you are destroying your future, you're destroying the future generations. There is no continuation here of the world. And therefore, this goes against God's plan to populate the world. But he goes on further. And he says the following, that this specific transgression, I'm going to say it in both Hebrew and English, is a tinuf ma'us u'mechu'ar me'od be'inei kol bal sechel. This is a disgusting, this is a rotten, this is an ugly transgression in the eyes of any person in his right mind. When I saw this in his right mind, it reminded me, if I'm not mistaken, in 1971, the American Psychological Association, they termed this kind of behavior as deviant. Well, there's another word, I forgot. It will come back to me. There's a certain word for it that they used it as unacceptable behavior, if I'm not mistaken, 1971. So when I saw this, that people that have a mind, people that are solid people, people that are healthy people, they look at this kind of behavior as something disgusting, filthy, dirt. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is, as we know, it says that the person that participates in such behavior, it's called abomination, toiva in Hebrew. In the tractate of Sanhedrin 82, page 1, it says the following verse. The following verse is brought down from the prophet Hosea, and it's brought by the prophet of Malachi in chapter 2, verse 11. It says the following: Bagda Yehuda has become a traitor. What transgression? Chazal, the rabbis say, what is this? How are they have become traitors? Because they're worshiping idols. And abominations have been done in Israel and in Jerusalem. What is that transgression? Chazal tell us, the rabbis tell us, this is homosexual activity. And therefore, in the Mishnah of Rabbi Eliezer says the following. He says that the transgression of homosexual activity is such a severe transgression that the Torah likens it to idol worshipping. One of the three transgressions that a person has to be willing to die for and not participate, even if your life is threatened, you are not allowed to become an idol worshiper. So therefore, it's likened, homosexual activity is likened to idol worshipping, and it's likened to murder. That's what the Mishnah of Rabbi Eliezer says. The third source we're going to bring down now, it says in the following holy book, it's called Lekach Tov, in the portion of Acharei Mot. It says the following. It says that the Jewish people, they did abominations more than animals. What does that mean? It says that a donkey has relations, a male donkey has relations with a female donkey. They don't have relations amongst themselves. But the Jewish people, at a certain time of history, they were worse than a donkey. They were worse than animals because they did participate in same-sex. So they're considered to be worse than a donkey, which is interesting because if you look at the clip of Kim Davis, you'll see that there's some person there that I guess he's been asking for this license. So she tells him, that she's refusing to allow him to get, she says, I don't understand. Just like you got married, why can't I get married? If I was in her shoes, at the same time, I would say, listen, what would you say if somebody came to me with a cat and say, listen, could you please give us a license to get married to a cat? Or I come with a zebra. Hey, could you give us a license with a zebra? What would you say? I would say no, right? So I'm telling you, this is the same thing. I'm not giving you a license, I wouldn't give them a license. So it's very interesting because the Torah here, if you notice, very interesting, if you look up in the Torah, you'll see that whenever it's talking about this kind of activity, a verse before or a verse after will be talking about relations with animals. Check it out. Check it out. Okay, moving right along here.
It's interesting, Rabbi, in the military code in America, that those two are in the same literally line of the military code. So when they pulled out the line about, don't ask, don't tell in America's military code book, they also, basically pulled out the animal bestiality as well.
Interesting. Okay, now, so far we've seen generation of the flood, we've seen Sodom and Gomorrah, we've seen the Egyptian people, we've seen the Canaanite people, and we've seen the Jewish people before they come into the land of Israel. All in one shot. The last tackle we're going to get to right now is a fourth case. The fourth case is in the prophets, in the book of Shoftim, Judges. And in the last chapters of the book, it talks about there was a couple, they were having some marital problems, and eventually they get together at one of the parents' house, and they stay there for a couple of days, and the parents really want them to stay for a while, so they stay a day and a second day, but after like the third day they really want to get out, and it's almost the Sabbath, and they're thinking about where can they stay, because time is of the essence. When it comes sunset, it's already Sabbath, you're not allowed to travel. So they did not want to stay in Jerusalem, because at that time, in the time of the judges, Jerusalem was being occupied by a nation called the Yebusim. So they did not want to stay in Jerusalem at that time. So they went on to a place called the hilltop of Binyamin. They went there in the hilltop of Binyamin, and nobody, Jewish community, nobody, Jewish people famous for their charity, famous for their soup kitchens and helping poor people and etc. Unbelievable. Here we had a really bad bunch of apples over here who refused to take these people in. Imagine that you've been traveling for some hours. It's almost the Holy Sabbath. You're getting ready for, where's the wine, where's the bread, where's that gefilte fish. I see also the Clintons, when they were checking the email, they saw all these letters with Hillary about gefilte fish, So I guess, they were preparing themselves for the gefilte fish, and no one's bringing them in. An old-timer brings them in, and a short while later, they look outside, put on their binoculars here, and someone's knocking on the door, and it's not the Israeli police, it's not the Secret Service here, Mossad. No, it's the parts of the community, not all the community, but parts of the community are surrounding the house. Now this should ring a bell. This is similar to what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, where they also surrounded. I say similar, and it's an important word, because you could look up on your own. We're not going to get into it because it's not our subject, but the Ramban, Nachmanides, has about 2 or 3 pages on the difference between why was Sodom and Gomorrah annihilated, and this community of the hilltop of Binyamin, why were they not annihilated? Why was the community still there? So he goes into all these differences. So it's a little bit similar, but not similar. But anyways, they're surrounded. And okay, so the old timer who lives there and brought in these guests, the only person that brought in the guests. So he opens his door and says, "What do you want?" And they say, "Please, we've noticed that you have a male guest." Right? They have male guests and also female guests. Send out the male guest. Like, whoa, here. They're asking to perform homosexual activity on this male. So the old-timer says, "Listen, please, he's my guest, and, if you're threatening me," I guess it was a life-threatening situation over there, "I'm willing to give you my daughter." The male guest hears this. He feels bad because of him. Now they're surrounding the building, and this guy who brought him in, now he's going to have to give his daughter. "I'm going to give you my wife. I'm going to hand over my wife." Now, just in parenthesis, okay, Chazal say, the rabbis say, that this is a terrible, terrible thing, because we know that a person in such a situation, instead of fighting for his daughters or fighting for his wife, hand them over. That's a very, very terrible thing to do. Okay, now why did they do that? We'll get to in the end. Very interesting take on why did they do such a thing. We'll see that though they should have fought, but there is a definite Jewish reason why they did what they did. We'll get to that later on. Okay. Anyways, that's the woman goes outside and they rape her over and over again, and eventually in the morning she comes back to the house where she was staying at, and there, right at the door, she finally passes away. The husband is furious. and though you're not allowed to do any kind of, when a person passes away, you're not allowed to start cutting up parts. You're not allowed to do anything to the body. You have to respect the body. There are certain times in history, this is one of the cases where sometimes the Torah allows certain behavior because it's such a desecration of God's name, this incident, so he cuts up her body into 12 parts and sends it, each part, to one of the tribes, and says, on such and such a date, we're all going to have a meeting to see what are we going to do to this place, to the hilltop of Benjamin. What are we going to do in order to rectify this situation, this tremendous sin that happened? Okay, they go to war. 2 times the Jewish people, the 11 tribes, lose, even though they're the big underdogs. They're the Chicago Cubs, you might say, big underdogs. Even though Binyamin was the big underdog, 2 times he's victorious over the 11 tribes. The third battle, Benjamin was almost totally destroyed. 25,100 out of 26,000 people were killed in that battle. So this is a pretty serious case. Okay, so let's take it step by step to see how, in the eyes of the Torah, how we look at the following. Okay, our first source is, we have Tana Devei Eliyahu, the book Tana Devei Eliyahu. We're on the 11th chapter. We're on the 3rd paragraph. Okay, I'm going to translate it into English. Yeah, if you think that the 70,000 Jews that were killed during this fight between the 2 sides, Benjamin's side, we said 25,100, and the Jewish and the other 11 tribes, if you think that the reason why the 70,000 were killed, what happened over there? Who's responsible? Very interesting. Who's responsible? You know, in our days, everyone tries to pass the buck, Oh, it's not me, it's him. They try to, spill their guts on the other guy. Try to get the other person. Oh, it's not me, it's the other guy. So who's responsible here? In Judaism, we take responsibility. The high level people take responsibility. So it says the high court, the Jewish Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, they're responsible. And also Pinchas, the famous Pinchas who we meet in the Bible, who lived for so long. He merited to have such longevity in his life. What they should have done is they should have gone out. And even though it's difficult, it's hot outside, it's cold outside, and whatever, there's mosquitoes, and there's it's dangerous on the roads, whatever. They should have gone outside, and they should have gone through all the communities of the Jewish people to teach them the ways to act, Jewish laws, how a Jew acts day in and day out. They should have spent 1 day in a community in the city of Lachish. 1 day they should have gone to Beit El. 1 day they should have gone to Hebron. 1 day they should have gone to Jerusalem. And every part, every community in Israel. And they should have taught the Jewish people how to act. And then it would have been just a matter of a couple of years, and then the Jewish people would have been a tremendous blessing, not only amongst themselves, but to the entire world. But they did not do that. And when the Jewish people entered the land of Israel, everyone started, worrying about his own house, building up his house, his fields, taking care of his fields. We forgot about the big picture. We forgot about the Jewish community. Everyone started worrying about themselves. There was no community feeling. And therefore, this led to the tribe of Benjamin, who did disgusting things and actions that are not worthy to participate. And when God saw what Benjamin did, he wanted to destroy not only Benjamin, the entire world. Listen, I'm glad everyone's sitting on their couch, on their bed, on their chair. You haven't freaked out, jumped off. Unbelievable. Torah's telling us this inner secret.
Hang on a second, sorry. Who is speaking? Daniel?
This is Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet speaking. Okay, so this is inside information. This is inside information that we're getting here. So that's what Hashem wanted to do. He wanted to destroy the entire world because of what happened there on the hilltop of Benjamin. What happened there? They surrounded a house and they wanted to perform homosexual activity. In the end, the guest's wife comes out and there they rape her, and therefore she dies. So those kinds of activities, Hashem wanted to destroy the entire world. Okay, and therefore it says, because of the fact that they did not do this, this led to the killing, this led of the deaths of 70,000 Jews in 3 wars between the Jewish people themselves. Who's responsible for their blood besides for Benjamin? Okay, is the Jewish Supreme Court that Moses and Joshua and Pinchas, okay, were responsible for. Okay, now listen to this important question. The question everyone here should raise is, listen, time out on the court. I understand why Benjamin was almost wiped out. 25,100 out of 26,000 people, man, that's pretty big wipeout. But I don't understand how come 40-some thousand of the other tribes who are coming here and raising the flag, it seems to be the flag of sanctifying God's name, why were they punished? I mean, it's pretty heavy. Over 40,000 people to die? They're coming here, they're protesting what happened there. Why should they suffer? I heard here from Brother Simcha, hey, since I come to Israel, I expected some brownie points, you know. I thought that at least God would give me a few brownie points, but I'm having so much trouble here. You got it, baby. You know you're on the right track. You know you're on the right track. As they say in bike language, how do you know on a bike when you're going uphill? If you're working hard. How do you know on a bike when you're going downhill? When you're not doing anything. How do you know when you're not solid? Is when you're not moving at all. You know, sometimes you just sit on that seat and your feet aren't on the ground. You're not solid at all. You're not balanced at all. Okay, so remember those 3 things. Okay, so that's the obvious question. And here's the answer. Number 1, the former Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva in Denver, Colorado, he asked that question, and he brings an unbelievable parable to it. He brings the case where it says in the Torah, it says in the Talmud, if we look in the Torah, we see the story of a Nazir, person that doesn't cut their hair, Nazarite, and then right after that, we see a chapter talking about a woman who cheated on her husband. So the Talmud asks, what's the question? Okay, what's the question between a person who accepts upon himself the vow of becoming a Nazir, and not drinking wine, etc., not cutting his hair? What's the connection between that and a woman who cheated on her husband? So it's just very interesting that if anybody saw this ceremony taking place, where it's a whole big ceremony where they're interrogating this woman, and when you look at this ceremony, what they're doing to her, and it's not very pleasant to watch it. What she did was much, much less pleasant. So what's the connection between the 2 sins? So it says that if you see such a ceremony happening between this woman, what's going on with this woman, make sure you yourself do not drink wine, because wine brings us to all kinds of bad kinds of behavior. You know, when people drink, so you know, it becomes very, very dangerous. People become violent. They run into the streets. People drive. People start to, you know, they don't have any patience. They beat up people. It's a bad scenario, you know, bad scenario. So the Torah teaches us that if you see such a woman, if you're at a ceremony where they're taking and investigating this woman, and you see they're about to punish her, if you're present at that ceremony, then make sure that you yourself keep away from wine, just like a Nazir would. So listen to this deep Torah by the head of the Yeshiva of Denver. He asked the question, this person who was in the stands, what did he do? He didn't do anything. He's just coming to watch. What's the problem? And the Rav says an unbelievable Torah. If there happens to be such a woman in the community who cheats on her husband, or a husband that cheats on his wife, if there happens to be such behavior in a community, it shines a light that there's some problem with this issue with the entire community. Why is that? Because if the community was clean in this area of modesty, it could never happen. Other things could happen. Other transgressions, yes. But if there's modest behavior sexually within the community, then this could not happen. It could not happen, because you would, not only the vibes, but once you create a true and beautiful society, it has influence on one another. Each Jew is connected, and that connection goes from one person to another. So if you have such community, this purity travels and goes from one person to another. It would not have allowed such behavior to happen. So if you see that it did happen, you're watching this and you're from her community, know that you better be careful, buddy, because your community is not clean on this specific transgression. So therefore, keep away from wine, because if you drink, you don't know what you're going to do. You're going to do all kinds of, you know, unusual behavior. So first, the idea here is, first, buddy, you better check yourself out before you're checking other people out. First, check yourself out on this issue before you go out and check other people. So let's bring it back. The Talmud in the tractate of Sanhedrin on the 102nd page, it asks the question, how come the 11 tribes who did the right thing, why were they punished? And over 40,000 people died in these wars. Why did Hashem do that? And it's an amazing answer. Listen closely. Let's always remember this. Always remember this lesson. We have Rosh Hashanah coming up in 12 days. We have Yom Kippur coming up in 20 days. Remember this lesson. It says the following. Because all of a sudden, when this happened in the hilltop of Benjamin, when this disgusting behavior happened, during this whole period of time, in that time of history, during these years, there was foreign worship, idol worshiping going around. What was that idol worshiping? There was a person named Micha. I'm not going to go into his history, but if you go back on some of the previous classes when we talk about Egypt and leaving Egypt, you'll see that's where we meet up with a person named Micha. And he had this form of idol worshipping. Everybody's silent. The Jewish people know about this. They know that it's happening. They know that it exists. It's on his Facebook page. It's on his Twitter account. He knows it's happening. Jewish people know it's happening. Shh. Let's not make waves. Let's not get heated about this. And they just let it go by. Nobody protested. Nobody yelled. Nobody shouted. Now, this idol worshipping is a transgression. Within the Torah, there are transgressions that are connected to internal human being relations, and there are transgressions between us and God. This transgression of idol worshipping is a transgression between us and God. What happened in the hilltop of Benjamin was a transgression between, an internal transgression between people. So the Talmud cries out, where was everybody? Why didn't anyone protest when there was idol worshipping going on? That didn't bother you. When people were transgressing, so to speak, and stepping on God, that didn't bother anybody. When people started stepping on other people, that bothered them. So Hashem says that's not the way a Jew works. A Jew stands on two legs. We stand on both the commandments between man and fellow man, and we stand on the commandments of man and God. And they're equally important to us. And we stand up and we protest if somebody's coming, if someone's coming to transgress. We stand up and we protest and we yell. It doesn't matter what the transgression is. So because of the fact that the 11 tribes did not protest this idol worshipping behavior, Hashem punished them. And when they went to fight a righteous cause, they were punished because of the fact that they did not demonstrate against the idol worshipping of the tribe of Dan. And once again, so the Jewish people kept silent on this. God willing, next week we'll continue part number 4, going down. Until next week.
I've got something I want to get on tape at the end here, Rabbi. And I'm going to try to say it really quick, but it's a fasten your seatbelt, and it's a slap shot on the Blackhawks net on a penalty shot.
Crawford.
With the goalie only with one eye open. Okay. So I asked in the beginning of this lecture about Noah, and apparently only logic sense would dictate that really the world and this nation of Ham and his people were empowered after Noah, because before Noah everything was destroyed. Okay, so let's fast forward this ark. There's another man with an ark, so to speak, in quote unquote our time. Okay, now this man was, from what I understand, was Jewish, but the king and queen gave him a dark and light name. Okay, they gave him, first of all, the name Christopher after their savior, but also Columbus. Now, Columbus is a New World Order term, Columbia, District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. So Columbia, I'm not too sure about the Columbus term, and I'd have to research that, but Christopher Columbus got in an ark, Rabbi, okay, in 1492, when the Jews were being expelled from Spain, and allegedly knew that the world was not flat, knew it was round, because in his logbooks, I lived in Barcelona for a while, there's a museum there, in his logbooks was written in Hebrew, and he allegedly, or supposedly, was Jewish, and understood from our writings that the world was indeed round and not flat, and was, had it in his logbooks and understood this. So that being said, so the ark traveled to this new land, okay, and at that point, almost like with Noah, a new land flourished, and the Jews were moved into this land. It became an alpha nation, which, like you were saying, the Jews are not going to be thrown into a Yemen, but only into a great nation. And now, if we move forward from that time where the Jews, I mean, there's a PBS series that you can watch where shows how the Jews were literally in the land since the time of Columbus. They were even in the West, and it's an interesting series to watch. But so now if we move forward up to the time where Pharaoh came, there was a point where he got his ministers. There's 3 ministers came to him. I don't want to get into too much detail, but he called these ministers and questioned, what should we do about the Jewish people? So it's interesting the last few years that this new Pharaoh of America, who's moving towards more of a Pharaoh type of lifestyle with his executive orders and stuff like this, number one, came after our food supply, food, shelter, and clothing, came after our food supply, crushed Mr. Rabashkin, eliminated literally kosher slaughter in America, like meat has been imported since then. But the Jews didn't get the point. They didn't kind of understand, like, wait, something's going on in America. There's an undermining of our our philosophy, our way of life. So now, what happens next? Now we're being attacked in America again from this not so Supreme Court, as you like to call it. They are now attacking our institutions. Rabbis will at some point come under fire for not performing ceremonies. These people will go to an Orthodox rabbi, will ask somebody in Borough Park to marry them, or Crown Heights or wherever, and these rabbis will have to fight. But it just doesn't only stop in America. It's now transferring over to literally the Haman of the world. They are now empowering. The ministers got together and yet further empowered a truly Amalek nation, an Aryan nation, where Aryan basically started from, Persia, is literally being reborn through this same system, through this same power structure that's in America. They are, giving a rebirth to a situation that could be very detrimental to Israel. So they're attacking on several fronts: our food, our shelter, meaning our institutions, and of course Israel itself. So I find it very interesting that, I guess the next chapter would be almost the Moshe coming, like Solomon said, nothing changes under the sun.
Oh.
So this Moshe character needs to, I guess, come and put America in its place from going after us.
Okay.
So, Yesha Koach.